Okay. So this particular webinar is going to really take a little bit of a deeper dive into working with project and specifically what is generally referred to as Microsoft 365 PPM. And what hopefully this webinar is going to do is give you a little bit of an insight into what's currently available, what's being used today, and what has been used kind of historically, and what we're going to have available to us really going forward, and some approaches that you might want to take. So we'll talk about the licensing a little bit to make sure that everybody's on the same page related to, what is out there, what types of licenses you have, and kind of what you get in each of those very specific areas. We'll also go into what's known as Dataverse and Power Platform and how that kind of fits in with this whole Microsoft 365 PPM. So the first thing is it really encompasses a lot of what we do around projects, whether it's storing documents, managing tasks, as well as any kind of security, communication related to team members, working back and forth, any type of automation, whether it's intake automation or risks or issues, things like that. Of course, reporting, and then being able to layer it with, a certain methodology and an approach to how projects get managed. So it really encompasses a lot of different areas. Think of Microsoft 365 PPM. It is a project management tool. It's in the cloud. And what Microsoft has done is they have started a movement towards storing almost everything that they're doing regarding apps and services in this cloud-based approach. And if you've been working with IT for a period of time, you know that we've moved away from more of a local server-based type of environment or approach to one that's a little bit, thought of as being remote or available to us in this cloud-based environment. So our approach within our organization has been to really tie these tools together, but also use a methodology and a framework to help put it all together. Because it's one thing to have a series of tools, but really being able to have them work with each other is, I think, key. And that's why we really focus on that part of it for organizations that we work with. So in that regard, we really focus on, from our specialization perspective, project, of course, and the tools surrounding it like Power Automate and Power Platform, Power BI, Teams, and Planner, right? Everything that an organization would need in order to manage projects. That's really the areas that we focus on. So the first thing I wanted to jump into to get clarification is, where does this new project for the web fit in? And how does that relate to project and project online? The first thing to understand is that a project for the web, again, as a new offering that Microsoft has put out there, is a web-based, right, or a cloud-based project management environment. It's one that you can stand up and start working with and start managing projects immediately in the browser. That's really its selling point, is that you can get up and running very quickly and easily. It's going to look a lot like other project management tools that you've used, including Microsoft Project. In fact, it has a lot of similar back-end capabilities, and it was largely built on the Microsoft Project desktop tool, and they kind of took what was working really well there and they transferred it over into Project for the Web. It's built on what's known as the Power Platform. The data that you create, the projects that you create, the tasks that you create, they all go into what's known as Dataverse, right? So Dataverse is the underlying database and databases that you will be working with when you start working with Project for the Web. When you start looking at the licensing and the subscriptions, you'll see these three start to stand out, this P1, P3, and P5. And we'll talk a little bit about the licensing and the subscriptions here in a moment. But looking over on this right-hand side, one thing that you'll notice very distinctly is that you have this Project for the Web, and I'll just bring my little pointer out here, that is really if we think about a separation point right here, that Project for the Web is on the right-hand side over here. And you'll notice that it's saying that data is saved in what we're calling CDS. So CDS and Dataverse are the same thing. This is what they used to call it, but then they changed it and said, let's just call it Dataverse. So this is where everything that you create and manage related to Project for the Web is going to be stored here, right, in this Dataverse environment. On the left-hand side, we're seeing Project Online, the desktop client, and we're seeing that all of the information that is being created and managed there is actually in SharePoint content databases. So as you create projects, you start to assign resources to tasks, all that information is being stored in these content databases. Okay, very useful, and historically that has worked very well. But what we're finding is that, let's go forward here, is that, as I stated earlier, Microsoft in many ways is moving away from storing our data in SharePoint content databases. And not that there's anything, wrong with that, or there's a limitation that comes with storing everything in content databases, but there are some advantages to moving it more into this cloud-based Dataverse environment, and we'll go through some of those. But that is Microsoft's kind of big plan, is to start to make that transition over. Now, before we talk in great detail about the Power Platform and Dataverse, just to be clear on the licensing, when you hear about P1, P3, and P5, these different options that you have, we want to make sure that we know that or understand that Project for the Web, as it's known, P for W for short, is Project Plan 1. Project Plan 1. So this $10 per user per month is giving you basically the ability to use Project for the Web. So as soon as you have that subscription, you sign on for that license, when you're in your 365 tenant, you will see the ability to just simply go up to the waffle in the upper left-hand corner and to start to create projects using this P1 license, okay? Now, on the right side, we're seeing Project and Project Online, and that's where P3 comes into play, as well as P5. Now, I've really been discouraging most organizations to really stay away from P5 for no other reason than in most instances, you really don't need it. If you dig into what the additional capabilities are with P5, they stress that it has some additional portfolio and resource management capabilities that you don't find in P3. But what we've also discovered is that a lot of organizations aren't really using that part of the tool. So it's not a necessary license for you to have to start using Project Online. You're perfectly fine with P3. What P3 is giving you is it's turning on the Project Online service, but it's also giving you the desktop client. It's a subscription essentially to Project Professional for that $30. So as opposed to you going out and buying a full licensed version that you would install on your desktop, and that's it, then you don't pay again. Instead, you're paying every month $30 for each user that is going to need the desktop client. So with a single P3 license, by turning that on, you're turning on the service, right? You have the capability to use Project Online. for users that are going to be interacting with Project Online, that are going to be maybe a resource manager, an executive, portfolio viewer, or team member, you simply need PWA Essentials, as it's known, which is a $7 license. One of the big mistakes or the miscommunications is that P1 and PWA Essentials are the same, and they're not. So they are different licenses that you will be working with. And I've got a slide coming up to make a comparison between the two. Now, before we do that, let's talk a little bit about where the Power Platform and Dataverse really sits with Microsoft. So they are making a heavy investment into what's known as Power Platform. So Power Platform is kind of the umbrella term that includes Dataverse, Power BI, Power Automate, all these different Power applications and services kind of sit under this umbrella, and Microsoft is really focused on that particular area. So when we think about project and the Power Platform, you can see that all of these different apps that we've been talking about, Power BI from a reporting perspective, Power Apps from the actual design and development, through Flow, or what's now known as Automate, all work in conjunction with Project for the Web. So Microsoft is really pushing us in this direction of saying, hey, let's start using Project for the Web, right? Project Online will eventually go away at some point, and we want to move you to Project for the Web. But we're going to talk about some of the limitations and also some of the opportunities that you have as this transition is being made. Now, let's distinguish between this P1 license and what's known as Project Online Essentials, just so that we really understand the difference between the two. So P1 is Project for the Web. It is giving you that particular license. It's that subscription that is just simply going to allow you to start to create projects. Okay. You notice it's saying a P1 subscription is independent from P3 or P5. Okay. So they don't work together. And P1, as you notice in the statement down here in the bottom, it's saying P1 does not include Project Essentials, because in a lot of ways they're saying, hey, what are you going to use? Are you using P1 or using Project Online? Because if you're using Project Online, there's a good chance that you don't need P1. Okay. And so this is where we're getting a lot of confusion. And even we get a lot of confusion directly from Microsoft when we talk to their licensing folks, because they say, yeah, you need P1 and you need P3, and some people need P5. And we're saying, well, not necessarily. What it's more like, the project managers need P3 and all the end users need Essentials, and nobody needs P1, right? Which is often the case when we're working with Project Online. When we talk about Essentials, which is not P1, it is what is going to be used typically by team members, right? All the team members, resource managers, maybe portfolio viewers, they just need this P1 license. It works with your P3 and your P5 licenses, right? It's what's basically allowing users to connect to PWA and start to work with it. Okay. So two different licensing, two different monthly subscription fees, right? So they are distinctly different. Okay. So again, just to reiterate, the data that we are storing and creating in Project for the Web is going to be stored in SharePoint. The data that we're using in P1 is stored in Dataverse, which is formerly known as CDS. So two totally different locations, which we'll get into when we look at the demo. I'll even take you to where those locations are. Okay, so now we know a little bit about kind of the history. We know where the data is being stored. Let's then go a little bit further and talk about how it's currently being used today. So when you think about PWA and Project Online, our approach to working with projects here has always been to simply use PWA as it is in conjunction with SharePoint, right? And it does a really good job, and it's done a very good job, over the years to store schedule information, task details, assignment-based information. There's even timesheet capabilities. There's even the ability to turn on the SharePoint site creation when projects get created for storing information. When you've been looking to track things like intakes, as you're seeing here, and change requests, and maybe you wanted to fine tune your issues or your risks, or maybe you wanted to track things like financial information, like budgets versus actuals, Project Out of the Box and Project Online has not done a really good job of that. It did a decent job with the issues and the risks, but when you wanted to create some type of formal intake, it really didn't have anything like that. If you wanted to manage all of your change requests, it also didn't do a very good job of that. So what we would often do would be to build SharePoint lists that would connect to the projects. And that was a good approach. It allowed us to have an intake process so that somebody, when they were creating a new intake, upon approval, it would create the project and go through. Or if they were managing change requests, it would allow us to say, I want to create this change request for this particular project. But everything, again, was still stored in SharePoint. Again, a good approach. We're able to get some, good reports out of it because we could pull in that SharePoint data and render it all up in Power BI. But it did have some limitations because often when you were working within the list, you had to go through all of the projects in order to choose or select the project that was of interest to you. So that was a little bit cumbersome. Plus, it was a SharePoint list, so it was a little bit heavy. So when you were looking for something or you were making an update, you were still using this back and forth between the end user browser and the actual data that was stored within the list. So it worked, but again, it was a little bit of I don't want to say pig, but it was a little bit of a, it had some tendencies to get a little bit heavy. Okay. Now let's talk about Project Online. As I mentioned, Microsoft has announced that at some point they will retire Project Online as we know it right now. And so this is the official statement from them. They're saying there is no date in which they put out there that says, hey, this is when it's going away. Okay. But even when they do make that announcement, remember that it's not immediately going to just simply say, well, it doesn't function anymore. Okay. There's going to be a period of time in which you will then be able to continue to still use it. But what Microsoft always will do is say, well, we're not going to add any new functionality to it. And after a period of time, we're not going to support it. So that's kind of where we are. And since the launch of Project for the Web, as you're seeing here, it's matured. It's a few years old. So we're kind of moving in that direction. So at some point in the future, we're going to have to say, hey, we know we're going to have to look at a new direction if we're going to stay with the Microsoft product line, right? And of course, there's going to be options for you to look at everything else that's out there that's available to you. So with that in mind, we need to have some planning in place to say, what are we going to do? Okay. Now, there are some limitations to Project for the Web. And these are limitations that we always point out to customers when they're debating, hey, should I just go right for Project for the Web, or should I stand it up in Project Online and then make the transition later on? What do I get and what do I not get in these different areas? So these are definitely some limitations that you have if you were to just go straight to Project for the Web. Things like master and sub projects, things like task type settings. That's kind of important. One of the big ones that stands out that I know quite a few of our customers would not be very happy with is the RBS security that's available in Project Online that we don't get in Project for the Web. We also don't get all of the project desktop full functionality. There's a lot of features and functions on the desktop that we simply do not get with Project for the Web. Project for the Web is only in the browser, has a lot of capabilities, and one would argue that those capabilities are enough for many organizations. But then others who are very heavy project users would say, no, I need that functionality. Things like baselining, checking in, checking out, those are some important things. So what we're saying internally is it's not quite ready for prime time, especially for some of the, the customers that we have that are a little bit more sophisticated. Not quite ready. But it's still gaining a lot of functionality. What we're also seeing is that Microsoft, as I mentioned before, is largely making the investment into new functionality for Project for the Web. Okay, so anything that is coming out that's new is being placed into Project for the Web. Not a lot of heavy investment into the traditional Project Online. So we definitely saw this coming, and it was important for us to make sure that we put a solution out there that was going to work well for new customers, but was also going to be helpful for customers that were going to be coming into that transition, right? Moving from Project Online, only Project Online, into quote unquote Project for the Web, or what we can just simply call Dataverse or the Power Platform, right, into this new environment. So what we came up with is what we're just referring to as PPM3, and you'll see on our website we have some information about what that is. And essentially what it is it's a hybrid approach. It's basically saying let's start making this transition over into Power Apps, into the Power Platform. Let's continue to take advantage of what we get out of Project Online, which is the ability to have a repository of projects. We still get to use Project on the desktop, and we still get to use all the resource management capabilities. So this hybrid approach will allow us to take organizations that are in Project Online, move them over into the Power Platform and Power Apps, and then eventually when Project Online does go away, we already have a platform, a framework in place that we can just start to move everything over into the solution. So it's a nice transitionary kind of period where we can still continue to get all the great capabilities. In fact, there's additional capabilities that we'll get, and we can still use Project on the desktop, get all the reporting, get everything out of it. Okay. So what this hybrid approach really is doing is, and it's something that we came up with that allowed us to keep a connection between Dataverse and Project Online. So essentially what's happening is we are storing all of the project information, and this would be everything from the owner to descriptions to financial information, of course, all the issues and risks and the financial details. All of that goes into Dataverse or the Power Platform. What stays in Project Online is the schedule information, and for the most part, of course, the task information and the resources. Okay, all that remains in Project Online, but all of the metadata, right, all that project information is going to go into Dataverse. Okay, and then through Power BI, we blend them together. We were able to pull everything together, and where our secret sauce comes into play is we just make sure that we're tying them together. We're tying them together through a unique project ID in both places. And for the most part, it's all about Dataverse just knowing which project it's referring to. So if you create a change request, it knows which project it is. If you're creating a new issue, it's related back to the project, and then you can tie everything together. So this hybrid approach has allowed us to really take advantage of both of these areas. So this is a nice illustration to see what we're talking about as it relates to things like portfolios and programs that you're seeing here at the top. All the portfolio strategic information at the very top is stored in the Power Platform or Dataverse, however you want to refer to that. It's the same thing. The projects themselves, the schedules, right, are managed in Project Online. Okay. So, and the project names match up, and you'll see what I mean when we look at the demo, that we have, right, a synchronicity between the Power Platform and Project Online. Through the name and through the ID, it's always going to be consistent. Documents, the budget information, any strategy, risks, and issues, all of that gets stored here in Dataverse. The tasks and the resources are still in Project Online, as we would expect them to be, right? And then over time, when we get closer to that retirement period, then we'll make that final transition out of Project Online, and then everything will be in Dataverse. But we'll be anticipating that when we get closer to that retirement date, right? But at least we've got a plan for that, okay? All right, so let's take a look at the demo. Enough of the slides. We'll spend the next half hour just kind of working through an example of just a quick little demo here of this hybrid environment. So go ahead and discard those changes. Okay, so this is just a little demo environment, this quick start PPM. If you've seen the project center and you're familiar with working with this, this will look like what you've seen before. You know, so we've got some projects in here, some start dates. You can see that I'm the owner of these ones. I'm even exposing the unique ID to get a sense of that. And you're also noticing that each of these names has a unique number, right? This 1020 through this 1026. Well, let's jump back into Power Apps. Let's see how these projects got created. So I'm going to come here into the Power Apps home. And some of you might not have seen this before, but this is the Power Apps, right, interface. This is their landing page. This is where you would basically be building the apps that you would be working with. And you can see that I've got this quick start PPM, right, app down here in the bottom. Now, what I'm going to do is just jump right to this tab over here, okay? And you'll notice that there's two of them, right? There's this quick start PPM, and notice what the type it says. It's model driven. This one right here says it's Canvas. These are two different types of apps that we can create in Power Apps, right? And remember, Power Platform was kind of that umbrella term. Now we're directly in the app. Let me show you the Canvas first, so you get a sense of what you can create with these. That's this tab right here. So notice that this is more of a type of form that you would see in Teams or maybe in other environments. You get these nice, elegant drop downs, right? These selections, text boxes, and the like. This is a Canvas-based app, and it has these big buttons like submit and exit and things like that. And these can go directly into Teams. You'll notice that up at the top here, I have Teams where I can easily get access to these same forms within Teams. That's typically where we'll place this type of intake form, will be within Teams, right? So users just navigate to a Teams area and then they're off to being able to create the request, okay? So that gives you a sense of the types of apps that you can create, either Canvas or model driven, okay? Now let me go to the right of that, which is this tab right here, to get into it. And now we're looking at the model driven app. This is actually the front end of that intake that you were looking at before. And so the idea behind this is, notice what it says, requests. And so what you're able to do here, whether you create it from the Canvas app or whether you simply come in here and say new, is that you're able to then create the project out of here, right? And notice the different options that you have. Here's things like the project type, right? Very similar to what we saw there. Initial project scope details. And it looks quite a bit like what we saw here, right? It's looking for the same type of information. So we'll go ahead and let's just type in demo project here and we'll get one created. Demo project, software development, let's say it's high, strategic alignment, moderate, any number of things. And you're saying it's, different data fields like currency, multi-line, yes, no's. You could have any number of options here. And I'll go ahead and just submit that one. Okay. So that sends it over and says, hey, great, thanks for submitting that. Okay. So now we're going to come back in here and I'm going to go back one. And we're going to do a quick little refresh. And notice there's that demo project, and we'll refresh it one more time to get to that. And now I'm going to go into the demo project. So notice that it created that demo project here for me, okay? And there's the missing information that I can come in here and I can create at any time. Now that request got created, I'm going to go ahead and pull this up here. You'll notice that, or you didn't notice it, but I noticed it, that I got an email, right? So an email came across saying there's a new request. So this is where Power Automate comes into play. That as soon as a new request gets kicked off, either a recipient or a group would receive it saying, hey, there's something you need to go take a look at. Okay. Now I refreshed that one more time because I wanted you to see that the other thing it did is it added a unique identifier to the name, right? And this is something that, again, Power Automate is coming into play to make sure that we can incrementally identify each of the projects that we're working with. So behind the scenes, we're basically telling it, take the name, but then let's just add this unique number behind it so we've got that nice little sequence going on, okay? Now, what is also happening, I'm going to just drop over here to the reports, is there are a number of reports that Power BI can be pulling from to show us all of the requests that are coming through. So I would have to go do a data refresh in order to see that demo project, but you can just assure yourself that it would be coming in here, right? Because every night we would do a refresh and we would be able to see all the requests. So we're seeing that directly within the app, Power BI can be embedded and it can start pulling those requests forward. And notice that there's a number of tabs down here in the bottom, pulling very unique information. But within the Power Apps environment, I'm able to just quickly and easily go between the requests that are coming through and the reports that are also found here. And this is just called the change area here on the left-hand side. And I'm just going to go into Teams so you can see this as well, is that notice that I have the same app basically within Teams. So often when we deploy the solution, we look to put almost everything in Teams so that users can just work within this environment. And notice I could come up here and do something like an expand tab, and I'm pretty much just directly in the app, but I'm still here in Teams working through everything. Okay, and I'll go back to the form here. All right, so what's the next thing that's typically going to happen? Well, of course, the project is either going to be approved, right? Maybe rejected or put on hold, and that's managed here with this request date. So everything that we've done up to this point is in the Power Apps environment. Project Online has not played any kind of role yet, okay? Well, it really shouldn't play a role until I approve this particular request. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and set this to approved, and I'm going to save and close it. Now, it's still going to stay here as a request, but now I could filter this by whether it's approved or not, or maybe it's been rejected, maybe it's on hold, whatever the case may be, I'm able to control that, okay? and I can go back into it and get any information that I need to get from it. When I go now into projects, and notice that it's the projects area, we can see that it has moved into projects. And if we had navigated here, we wouldn't have seen this, right? Because it was only in requests. And so a couple of things that it's doing is that because we've approved it, it's brought it here into the projects area. And now I can click on it to dive into it, and it put it as a request state. Now, the only reason why it's doing that is it's basically just telling us that it's moved from the request, it's now a project, but we may want to have it just sit here as a request until we put it in process. We sometimes see that because an organization may still be doing a couple things with it before it's actually going to go live. Okay. Now, that's all up to us as we develop these solutions. In some cases, you say, well, no, it's gone through request. It's now approved. I'm going to take it right into in process. That's fine. That's easy to do. It's easy to adjust that. In this case, we're going to go ahead and let it in request until we decide it's going to move forward. Now, the other thing that you'll notice is that now that it's an approved project, I get all of these additional tabs that I can manage. Issues, risks, change requests, budgets and actuals, status reports, right? Gate reviews, all of these tabs are what we often call dynamic apps. And it's up to you as to which ones you deploy. Some are going to be more relevant than others. I think these ones here, like status reports through change and budgets and actual, these are probably going to be ones that most organizations would be, looking to implement. Okay. I'm now going to go to Project for the Web, do a quick refresh on here, and lo and behold, what do we see? Demo project. So also as part of that automation step, when the project was approved, it automatically creates the project in here. Again, part of that, that secret sauce that we're doing behind the scenes to say, go and create that project. What we've also done, if we go back to project information, is we've brought the detailed schedule URL into the Power Apps environment, along with that unique ID. So now this project is fully aware of the project in Project Online. So the project manager can simply click on this link here and navigate directly to the schedule, right? And it's all working with each other. So that's a significant part of the overall solution. The other thing that it has done, and I'm going to go back here into Teams, is we'll go all the way down to the bottom here, is we also have it create a team. So if we go into the very bottom here, you'll see that I'm in the 1027 demo project. So we want all those things to kick off simultaneously when the project is approved. We want it to, of course, create the project in Dataverse. We want it to create the project in Project Online, and we want it to create the team. This is where we're going to store all of the relevant information related to that particular project. We'll go directly in here, right? So all working in conjunction with each other, all synchronized right together. Now let's look at some of these dynamic apps. We'll start with something like a status report. Okay. So in the status reports area, really the expectation would be that as a project manager, I would come in and fill out a status report for every period. So if I go to status reports, I'll click on new status report, and I'm able to fill out this particular report on that particular period, giving it a name, my update notes, what did I accomplish, what are my planned activities for the next period, what have you. So any of these different dynamic apps, if I go into issues, for example, and I create a new issue, you'll see that there's a number of fields that are available for me to fill out. Everything you're seeing here is completely customizable. right? You might see some things in here and say, well, that really isn't relevant to us. Do we have to have that? Absolutely. They can be added or removed. Okay, get out of that. And it's the same thing across the board. Change requests, budgets and actuals, lessons learned, you name it. For construction customers, often they have different requirements. That's why we have a very specific solution set for them, where they're a lot of times wanting to track more detailed financial information. They might want some site information that they're tracking for their PMs, right? That they might find useful. Now, the other aspect to this is the use of Planner, So Planner can play a role within an organization because they want to maybe manage a lot of the activities in Planner. And now I'm going to go into Planner. So what Planner allows us to do is Planner can then be connected back to a particular project. Okay. Now, this is an area that, when I show this, a lot of organizations don't know or haven't seen before, where you can use these planner plans as essentially templates. So notice this one right here, Quick Start PPM template. So because we already have the team, right? Remember the team that we looked at earlier? I'll just navigate back to it so you recall the name, this 1027 demo, right? When I go into the planner plan and I come here into planner, I can click on this guy and say, I'm going to copy this plan. So the idea would be you would have a planner template that you're able to use in conjunction with your project schedule. Okay. Now, and those don't conflict with each other because a lot of times PMs like to use them in a combination. They may manage more of their unstructured task activities in the planner plan and then manage more of their deliverables, right, in the project schedule. It's really up to you. But what I'm going to illustrate here is that you can use Planner to help you with that. So I'm going to copy this plan, right? And notice what it's looking for. It's looking for the name, right, to use. But we already have our demo project, right? The one that we created earlier, right? Demo project. So because the team was, and notice that I didn't do a lot. I mean, I just approved it and it created all these. But I'm able to now create this plan. And usually what I recommend is go ahead and give the plan the same name as the project. Keep everything consistent here. So now I am doing a little bit of typing. And you may be wondering, well, is there an easier way? Could you have dynamically created the plan? Not yet, at least not within the automation can we do it. So this would be something, an admin or a project manager would need to do. But I'll go ahead and copy that plan. So now what that's given me, and I'll just do a quick refresh, 1027 demo project. Let's go take a look at it. And because it's coming from a template, we already have much of the activities that we would typically manage within the schedule, right? All within the planner plan. Then if I come back to my team in here, right, I would be able to then add very easily that planner plan in here, okay, in here. So there's the task by planner, and here it's basically saying, okay, you want to add a planner plan because the group was already created as part of that whole creation process. It pretty much knows which planner plan you want because the group is already tied back to the project, right? So there's a lot of, again, this synchronization that we're building into it so that really you have a central place, right? We have Dataverse that's giving us all the project information, issues, risks, all the financial details. We have the project schedule being dynamically created upon the approval. We have the planner plan for more unstructured activities, which could be as detailed as you saw here, as high level as you need it to be, but all of that being synchronized. Use an existing plan from a team, right? Or create a new plan. And here, notice that it already finds it, right? Because it knew it from the group setting. So there's no confusion. We don't want, when we start to use things like planner and teams, we're going to want consistency across the board. Same names, same IDs, right? Everything consistent. So now I'm pulling in that planner plan directly into teams, and the expectation is the user can work out of here, right? So we're using a lot of, tools that will be familiar to your end users. Now we've got about just a couple of minutes left. I do want to show you some more of the report. So I'm going to come back into here and drop back into the reports area. And as I mentioned, all these different tabs that you're noticing down here in the bottom, like portfolio dashboards, portfolio health, and things like this, these are all coming from, right, Dataverse to pull that information, risks, issue dashboards, right? Again, being brought in, not from the SharePoint sites, but rather here from the Dataverse environment, and it's pulling that project information forward. Okay. Then I'll come back here to projects to get a sense of that. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.